Last thing I wanted to set up for this, just to get the screen share in.
Okay.
Yes, bad luck to start on time.
Nice.
It's true.
You know,
It's true.
we might just need to go with what we've got here.
Okay. Go for it. I'll see what actually, here, let me, I can technically get things present. I can just grab the screen by doing this. So I get you and the screen, and it just won't be quite as crisp presentation-wise, but I should be able to see it. So, give me a half sec more.
You just have that one face right at your face.
Right at my face? Well, that's what the laptop's for, so
Oh.
hopefully that'll be due. I'm just trying to make sure I get, if possible, get both of you guys.
Turn it around and get dual angle of the presentation.
That could work. I think I'm just going to have to call it here. See, it's always fun to do things in new spaces, so for what it's worth. Don't let me knock it over. Cool. All right, so as a place to start, I'll keep an eye on anything in the chat. I will say that for those of you who are here today, we do have a couple books to give away. So actually, Frank, I didn't mean to leave that box over there. If you want to carry that. But as a place to start, this is Frank Wilson. His pen name is Wilson Carter. He recently self-published The Player and the Pawn. This is not his first publication, but I think it's your first fictional novel, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Tell us, so just give us a little bit of basic background, and I'm going to give each of them a copy of this particular book. But
cool.
Just a little background on who you are.
Sure. So I've actually been a college professor here at Chandler Gilbert for 20 years.
Awesome, thank you.
And I've written a variety of books. Math textbooks primarily is what I wrote. I wrote a children's book. So this is my first novel. And so I've been working on this book for about 7 years. But over the last couple of years, I really decided to buckle down and just get it done. And so I worked really hard. And last September, on Constitution Day, it was published by a company I set up called Deep End Dynasty. That's my imprint name. And so now it's out on audiobook, it's out on ebook, hardcover, and paperback. So it's been quite a journey. I learned a lot in the process. I don't claim to have mastered the whole industry yet. I'm still learning, but I'm happy to share with you everything I've learned and any questions you might have. How many people here are aspiring authors or want to be published at some point, or who are already published maybe? Aspiring? You as well?
I honestly haven't really put too much thought into it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm happy to share with you what I've learned over my journey. I'm still learning. I plan to write more. So that's kind of a little bit of my background.
We have I gave Frank a couple different types of questions to think about as far as writing process and kind of some of the economics of publishing and that sort of thing as far as self-publishing went. But it's probably better if we start with any questions that you guys might have just about either writing in general, creative writing, or trying to do the publishing side or self-publishing side. So what would be things you would want us to start with?
So here are some prompts, but we can start right in the middle with your open questions. Let's do the open questions first, and then if you want to dive into other things, we can dive into those as well.
So you can treat it like a Jeopardy board unless you have something else on your mind.
I have a question.
Sure.
What would you say is your most difficult task when trying to write a book like this?
So there's two separate processes. One is creating your book, and the other is getting your book in the hands of your readers. Getting your book in the hands of your readers, that is the hardest part.
Okay.
Because you've got to find who those people are, and they have to be able to find you. And the market is flooded. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of authors out there. So that piece is the real heavy lift. The writing part, the most challenging part of the writing, I think it is finding your voice and then being able to write consistently with that voice. Finding your voice takes some effort. And so what I learned in my journey as I was writing, I have kind of a natural way I write. I like to use lots of descriptions and really create an immersive experience. But I was writing in the thriller genre, and the thriller genre expects things to be fast-paced. And so I had to think about, okay, how do I modify, how do I adjust my writing? What is my voice like in this genre? Because my default didn't necessarily fit. And so I had to learn what that was and then learn how to write that way. And it took a little bit of practice to kind of make that transformation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
What is self-publishing?
Self-publishing is when you choose to take on the responsibility to produce your book in all aspects of the publication process up until you basically send it to the printer and they print it. So right now there are companies that will do what's called print on demand. So for example, this book here was printed by a company called Ingram Spark. And so when customers buy my book, that gets sent over to Ingram Spark, who prints the book and sends it to my customers. So self-publishing is you take on the entire process, not just the writing part. Now, if you're traditionally published, okay, I've been traditionally published as well in my textbook space. My job was to write the book, and then I sent it off to my editors and the publishing company. They paid all the people to do all the editing for me. They did all the layout. They did all the printing. They did all the marketing. They did all of that stuff. And then they kept 85% of whatever revenue was generated in return for that. And I got 15% of whatever was generated. So, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask, why did you choose to self-publish?
Sure. So that's a great question. As a matter of fact, let's go to my little slide right here, because that will answer that question for you. So it's a really important question to ask yourself if you want to go down this route. Do you want to traditionally publish? Do you want to self-publish? As I mentioned, the market is very, very competitive, and it's tough to get into the traditional publishing market. Often you will need an agent, especially in the space of a novel. So there's a couple of hurdles you have to cover. First of all, you've got to get someone to be your agent who chooses to, based on what they see of your work, okay, I will be willing to be your agent. And then they are going to shop your manuscript around until they can find someone, a publisher, who says, I'm going to take a chance on this author. And so that process takes a while. And then once you get your manuscript accepted, it might be 2 years after that before it's published. And when I started the novel, I didn't know which route I was going to go, but my novel deals with the 2028 presidential election and also deals with themes related to the Constitution. And this year, 2026, is the 250th anniversary of the formation of our country. And I wanted my book out for that. And I knew if I went traditional publishing, I would miss that window. So that's one of my marketing hooks, is related to, hey, we're thinking about the Constitution, we're thinking about our country. My book talks about that, it's references to that, and so I wanted to publish and be out in time. But there's several reasons why I chose to self-publish. One is, if you traditionally publish, you lose some self-control over the artistic side, because the publisher's interest is to make the most amount of money. And so if there's something in your book that they think might be triggering to certain audiences or might not be politically correct, they may put some pressure on you to cut, refine. And so I had this happen with me on one of my textbooks. I was doing statistical data from the Rodney King riots. I don't know if you know about those back in Los Angeles. It was a racial violence sort of thing.
So early 1990s, one of the first video recordings of police brutality, kind of in the more current era.
So when I included that in my textbook, I wanted to create a space to have a conversation using statistics and not just emotions. We could look at these things. For example, on his trial, it got moved to Simi Valley, which was 96% white, and he was black, and he had an all-white jury. So what did that do? If he had been tried where the crime happened, it was like 46% white, 56% people of color. So was there bias that he got an all-white jury? Well, probably not, because in Simi Valley, 96% of the people were white. But so I wanted to have that conversation, but my publisher said, ooh, that's a little too raw. Bring it back down. You can address those types of ideas, but let's not alienate people. So for this novel, I wanted to be able to have that full artistic control so that I could include the things that were important to me and not be pressured to cut or remove things that I felt I wanted in the book. Other things is if you self-publish, you own the whole process, but that means you've got to fund the entire process. And that can be tough, especially if you're starting out. So when I was writing my textbooks, I didn't have the kind of, there was no way I could have self-funded a textbook. I wouldn't have done it. I didn't have the marketing machine. So it made a lot of sense for me to go with the traditional publisher, take the smaller cut in terms of royalties, and then they were willing to take a risk on me and pay in advance and provide some funding up front. And so it was guaranteed money for me, and so I was willing to take a lower percentage cut because I had some guaranteed money up front. But definitely a lower royalty rate. You see here, typically 7.5% to 15% would be the royalty rate you get on your sales there. Over on the self-publishing side, you can get up to 70% on royalties on whatever you sell. So a lot more opportunity to make money, but you're doing a whole lot of work to earn those sales. And you don't have the network that the big publishers do. Have I addressed your question? Well, whose question?
That was mine.
Yeah.
This was really helpful.
Yeah. One thing to be aware of about self-publishing, sometimes people who self-publish get a bad rap because some people equate self-published with poor quality. And we'll talk about that. I've got another slide we can talk about that. So if you choose to self-publish, don't skip the steps that the big publishers do. And that was one thing I decided, if I'm going to self-publish, I'm not going to skip the steps that are critical to get a quality book to the market. I'm still going to go through all those steps. Because some people will just crank out something, put it out there in the market, and say, this is my best novel, and it's filled with typos, grammatical errors, formatting things, and then the consumer, the buyer says, this is awful. I expected something way better. Oh, it's self-published. Oh, therefore self-publishing must be bad. So just to be aware of. The way I structured it for me, I set up a company, and then I had my little company publish my book. And so it's got a company name. I didn't just do my name. I did a company name, and then it's published that way. And then that company can grow. That also protects me. In case I ever get sued, they'll sue the company. I've got some limited liability on myself. All right. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
What does your writing process look like? Do you use any specific tools or anything?
Yes, absolutely. So let's dive into that. And by the way, I should have defined these graphics. These are my math textbooks I wrote, traditionally published. That was a children's book I wrote, traditionally published, and then my self-published book. All right, let me get back to the writing process. So let me jump to writing software. That might kind of speak to what you're asking about. And then I can go into that, and then I can elaborate based on how I actually construct ideas if you want.
While he's pulling up the next slide, I'll say my experience with using a publisher for my writing textbook has been very similar. Like I've got a 14% royalty rate, and one of the things there's less control over how much the book costs there because of the way I have it published. There are certain kind of marks. If I had a certain number of chapters, it would go up. So I had to try and structure my content to fit within certain parameters so that they could publish it for cheaper. So for what it's worth on that publishing side.
And if you ever go down that road, when they offer you a royalty or a royalty rate and then an advance, all that's negotiable. So they might give you a boilerplate contract and say, oh, this is our contract. But you can negotiate. So when on my last two textbooks, I did have some negotiating power in that deal. And so I was able to negotiate an $80,000 advance. of which 40,000 of it was a grant. So, which means it didn't have to be paid back out of royalties. But I had to negotiate to get there. I didn't start there. And it wasn't my first textbook. I wouldn't have been able to negotiate that on my first textbook. This was on my 6th, or my 7th and 8th textbooks. I was able to negotiate that. All right, back to writing process. So I started my process in Microsoft Word. And as much as I like that software, it's not great when you're going to write a novel. And the reason being is when you're writing a novel is really a collection of scenes that are put into chapters. And as you get feedback, you might need to move things around. You might need to move this scene. Oh, I need to move this scene to another chapter. I need to cut that scene. And that's really cumbersome to do when you're in Word and you're dealing with like a 90,000 word novel, and then you've got to go cut scenes or move things around. So I tried, trying to remember the intermediate software I tried, which I ended up getting rid of because it wasn't working very well. But Scrivener is the industry standard, I would say. Many people use Scrivener to write. And so let me tell you a little bit about how it's structured here. So, and also talk about general structure in general when we look at the structure slides. But typically you're going to write your novel in 3 acts, Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, and there's some core elements that need to be in each act. So I just labeled my folders here. Hey, this is Act 1, this is Act 1, here's what's going on, here's some little descriptive words so I can keep track of what things are. And then I had AI help me. After I wrote a chapter, I said to AI, I dropped my chapter over into ChatGPT and said, write me a 3-sentence summary of my chapter. And that's where these are coming from. That was just for me in my writing process. So this is just a summary of that whole chapter in like 3 sentences. But what's nice here, all these are scenes. So if I need to cut a scene, if I need to move a scene around, I can do that easily. I can also tag these things. So let me go down to this one. So this is a chapter, and there are 4 scenes in this chapter and 2 different points of view, and I'm going back and forth between those points of view. So I've got these color-coded here. So you notice blue, green, blue, green. So I was able to set up in this software, I color-coded it based on whose point of view it is. So I was able to look quickly at my novel, where are my points of view? And making sure I'm remaining true to my point of view, and also I can answer the question, whose point of view am I writing from in this chapter? And you've got to know that. And so I had to discipline myself to answer that question, whose point of view is this? And then I labeled it so I can see it. So here, this is going from Caleb over to Everton, back to Caleb, and then back to Everton, all in one chapter, and I can see the little summaries of what those scenes are. So I found this software was extremely helpful for me. As I'm starting my next novel, I'm definitely starting in this place. I'm not even going to Word at all. However, once you get ready to move into the editing process and working with editors, oftentimes they'll want it in Word. So you do as much as you can here, then export it to Word, and then start running through your editors who will, they'll either Word or Google Docs, they'll do their commenting. Oftentimes they'll use Word though, and then you can go back and edit in here. But for the creation of it, this is most helpful. That's been my experience.
I like that you're highlighting how the technology can be used to structure the story from the beginning. That way it's, because yeah, if you are, one of the challenges, if you're writing in a Word document, if you're going a couple hundred pages, like that's a whole lot of scrolling, or if you're on Google Docs, even if you've got chapters, you really have to think about how you're organizing and how you make that process smoother. Even if you're a consistent writer and a habitual writer, it can be like you don't want to have to click 3 layers in before you can get to your story or before you can kind of place the section you're working on. So yeah. I like that you're talking about the way the technology can kind of mediate the writing.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, it definitely helped me a lot. And I had to, after I went through my first round of editing, I had to cut tens of thousands of words because I'd written my initial version, my initial draft. I won't call it my initial draft. My best polished work prior to the editors, right? This was my best work up until I got the editors, but I had 15 points of view. And so that meant there were 15 different characters whose lens people need to understand. For the genre of a thriller, that's way, way too many. And they told, my editor said, hey, you need to get down to 4. So I had to go wipe out entire characters, entire chapters, entire scenes to get down to 4 points of view for my novel. Okay, now I'm not going to start with 15 points of view for my next novel. I'm going to start with 4, but that's part of my learning process.
Which ones did you get rid of? Or how did you get rid of them? Did you consolidate them? Did you decide they weren't as important?
Benjamin Wu and his wife Clarice and their son all got, they just got cut from the novel completely. Miguel remains in the novel, but we don't see his point of view. He just remains in one scene. But I had a really tender scene between him and his wife. You know, he's a cholo from California, from the streets. But there's this kind of redemptive moment with he and his wife. I had to cut that entire chapter from the novel. And it was one of my favorite chapters. I cried in it. But because I needed to focus just on 4 points of view for me, which was Caleb, Calissa, Everton, and Roca, who's the FBI agent, I had to cut a lot of those scenes. So, but I still love those characters. They're still sitting in the background. And if I can bring them back at some point, I'll probably go resurrect them and bring them in. But there were some characters I just couldn't, they weren't a major enough character that I could focus on their point of view. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
What's the first words ladder?
What's a word
I
ladder?
saw that on the, it was like the first section on the planning thing.
Sure. So, first of all, I'm a mathematician and I love puzzles and patterns. And so all throughout this novel, I've built in puzzles and patterns. So that's part of the joy for me in the writing process. And so a word ladder, this is a game that's been around for a long time, and my son and I will play it all the time. You start with one word, and your goal is to get to another word by changing one letter at a time. But all the intermediate words have to be words. Okay? So you might go, say you're going to go wind to snow. You might go wind, and then you might go wand, and then you might go want. But you can only change one letter, but you're trying to get closer and closer to the word you're trying to get to. So in the novel, Everton and this unknown person, they play this word ladder game back and forth, and it triggers an event to happen when they do that. So, but back to the writing, I wrote that in because I find joy in that. And when you're feeling joy as an author, and when you're feeling that sort of energy, that excitement, your writing will be better. Because that comes through, that emotion, that feeling, that, this is fun, that comes through in your writing, and then your readers can feel it. Another thing I did that was kind of fun, do you guys know what Easter eggs are in terms of writing? So I went back and I found 10 best-selling thrillers, and I wrote their titles into my novel as a part of the narrative flow. So for my passage, for my readers who become, passionate followers, they can go back and say, let me go see if I can find the names of the 10 titles of best-selling thrillers that just appear naturally in the narrative. That's just a little game I played with myself.
What's one example of one of those that we might look for when we're reading?
Surprise.
Well,
Yeah,
actually, the
just to have a
one,
primer,
the one that will be easiest to find, I actually, without naming the character, I write the character into the book into one paragraph from a best-selling thriller. So you see the character it turns out, on the train. I don't know if any of you know this book, The Girl on the Train. Anyone ever know the book, The Girl on the Train? Okay, it's a thriller, and so I wrote that character, didn't name the character, didn't name the book, but I just said, hey, she's just the girl on the train, and that's it. But there's the title of the book. And so it was kind of a tribute to those who write in the genre, and also a fun thing for my readers to play around with and see.
Very cool. Very cool.
I have a question. What's the to AI or not to?
To AI or not to AI? That is the question. All right, and this is a huge question. Very, very hot right now in the whole writer space. And so I actually belong to a group called Authors Supporting Authors. It's a Facebook group. And I just posted this question because I was seeing a lot of, I don't know, attitude is the wrong word, but a lot of energy, I'll just call it that, that's a positive way to say it, around this discussion. So I asked, for the anti-AI authors, is there any appropriate way for authors to use AI? How about research of a topic for inclusion in the novel? How about critical analysis of a first draft? How about generating a list of alternate words or phrases to represent the same concept? Writing is an iterative process where authors rely on feedback from others to improve the quality of their work. I say beta readers and editors provide invaluable feedback. What makes the editorial AI function different? So you can see this generated a fair amount of activity. There were 489 comments. So I'd like to share with you just some of the different comments that I got related to the use of AI. Before I do that though, what are your perceptions on the use of AI in writing?
We may say specifically creative writing, just to
Creative writing, yeah.
keep people out of trouble with school and classes.
Yeah.
And whatnot.
I'll go first, I guess. I generally am a very anti-AI kind of person for reasons I won't explain because that will change the entire discussion.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know. Again, yeah, I'm not going to get into
Sure.
it.
Okay, so you did.
My stance. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. And some of those folks who share that stance are absolutely some of my responders on this. Any other ideas?
I mean, you described earlier how you like put a chapter into it to come up with a summary. I feel like that's fine because you're not actually using it to generate like ideas that you're going to put in the story. But I feel like creative writing should be like from your imagination. Like it's your story to tell, not an AI's story.
Okay, good. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think if you use it as like a tool, I feel like there shouldn't be anything wrong with that. If you're just having it like double check your wording and flow and everything like that, as long as you're not just saying, "Hey, write me a story," and then just posting that as yourself. So yeah.
You with that?
Kind of what Oliver said. Like, I feel like personally, I'm not the type of person to ever use AI. I'm anti-AI, but I think in terms of like if I was writing and wanting to get feedback or like you mentioned like even critical analysis or things like that, I would prefer to get it from other people. But that's just in my opinion.
Awesome. Let me share with you some of the perspectives of some of those who responded. I've tried to grab representative viewpoints, not just one viewpoint. So there's generally the anti-AI perspective, which is there is no need whatsoever to use it for anything. So if you use it, you're cutting corners, and AI for writers is paint by numbers for artists. So there's a nice little metaphor there. This person, Sam, says he's even questions using spell checks and grammar checkers as an AI. He says, I mean, that's even questionable for him. There are folks who absolutely believe it's cheating if you use it in any form. So you can see that language here. And finally, Jen says there is no ethical use of stolen intellectual property. So her viewpoint is AI represents stolen property, and any use of it is feeding that. So these are some strong views and representative of some of the things I saw there. Then there's pro-AI perspectives that says, Michelle says, listen, I don't mind in the slightest if an author uses AI for whatever they find useful. So it's just no restraint, use it however you want. Justin agrees, use it for everything. Kevin, you can use it AI any way you want. Just let those cranky pants boring people who don't know how to talk to robots cry and moan. So there was I didn't bring in all the colorful language that came with this discussion.
Luddites as well there.
Yeah. But then there's some moderate perspectives. And Gregory says it's a tool, like a hammer or a wrench to build a house. Misha says researching a historical detail, checking plausibility, pressure testing a first draft, or generating synonyms isn't authorship. It's what beta readers do. So that's kind of the moderate perspective. Rob really had a nice argument. He said, the argument between purist authors and writers who use AI isn't really as black and white as it gets portrayed online. And that's absolutely the case. Because there are different ways you can use AI. And there are ways that you can use AI that can rob you of learning and rob you of creativity. And there are ways that you can use it that can amplify your learning and amplifying your creativity. And so he talked about the distinction between assistive AI and generative AI and making that distinction. He made a really beautiful argument in this space. But you've got to be careful. I mean, you've got to be careful. And however you choose to use it in your writing or not use it, it's important you be honest with your readers about what you did. And also with your publishers. If you publish with Amazon KDP, they will ask, how did you use AI if you used AI? Same thing with Ingram Spark. They will ask, how did you use AI? And so the way I use the AI in my writing, and I disclose this to my audience, is I embrace the blend of tradition and technology. I drew on the written word, expert human editors, and an AI assistant to shape the final work. So what my writing process was, I'd write a chapter, write a paragraph, write a scene, and then I drop it over to AI, critique my work, give me some feedback. And it would give me some feedback. Might say, hey, you're using these words repetitively. Later in my process, I developed a style guide, which I uploaded based on feedback from my editors, and I uploaded that to AI and said, critique my work based on this style guide. This is how I want to write. This is how I'm trying to be. See how well am I meeting that standard. But the key is you have to be the one to determine what to accept, what not to accept, what recommendations. And some recommendations will be terrible, and some will be awesome. But you have to make that decision. Also be aware, AI loves M dashes. And so if you use M dashes in your writing, people will accuse you of using AI whether or not you did. Another thing to be aware of is AI tends to push for common voice. And so it has common phraseology that it'll use, and it will push you towards this kind of this norm, I guess. And that might strip out some of your creativity and some of your creative words. So you just have to be very careful with it. For me, I found that I would write my section, write that thing, and then get some feedback. But I learned about all the M dashes, and we tried to fix that, on the back end. But I did disclose to my readers, here's how I used AI, and so that they know. And some readers won't buy my book because of it. Others will say, hey, you know what? It's a great story. I enjoyed it, and I don't care what tools you use. But the market's absolutely changing. I had to fire one editor because he just couldn't bear the thought that I would use AI in any way. And we were too misaligned for that relationship to work. I fired him before I hired him. I guess I didn't really fire him then. So we were in conversations. It just wasn't going to work.
It was a filter.
Yeah.
It's two things on this on the side of AI, or on the subject of AI. The centralizing voice, where it kind of takes away the unique way you want to say things, is very real. And then the other side of it is the layer of authenticity that partially the voice plays into. Even when I was doing my ebook, I started out trying to do rough drafts based on transcripts of YouTube videos of my teaching. And because I tried to just get it to give me the straight transcript and then just do some basic cleanup. And it kept trying to give me summaries or condensations or get rid of the specific examples I was using. And it was like fighting with it. I'm like, stop, okay. And then I just had to stop. I used different technology where there wasn't AI basically, and it was just transcription software as a place to start. On the authenticity thing, I think we're going to see the same. I think it's one of those things where I think I've had a lot of conversations about like wabi-sabi lately, or like the Japanese principle of the broken things made beautiful. And so I think people, AI will have a role on some levels, but if people feel that there's an inauthenticity to it, they'll go looking for art that doesn't that has an authentic human feel, even if that means there are more errors. And so, from a writing standpoint, I think it's helped highlight the fact that sometimes writing instruction and even in creative writing, sometimes the emphasis on, say, really strict adherence to traditional grammar norms and that sort of thing has made writers less effective and also easier to duplicate when their focus is on the wrong thing and not on, am I telling a meaningful story? Am I adding value through what I'm writing? That kind of thing. So.
One other really interesting thing that came out in this discussion is AI is giving voice to a population of people who may not have had voice. And I'm talking people like who've had traumatic brain injuries or who have other disabilities where they haven't been able to communicate their thoughts as well. And AI is allowing that group of people to engage and share their stories in ways that they wouldn't have. So I have a child actually who has a bipolar disorder. He's not a strong writer, but yet he's used AI to create music, to create things. He knows what he wants to say in his heart, but he hasn't yet developed those skills. It's provided voice, and with that voice has come confidence. The key then is okay, take that new confidence and then learn the craft, learn the skill. You can't get around learning the craft of writing. And so in terms of if you're serious about wanting to be a writer, whether you use AI or not, you've got to learn the craft. And so AI can be a tool, but just don't let it rob you of your learning. So, all right, other thoughts? Yeah.
I'm curious about marketing. Like, how did you go about that process?
Marketing, and I'm not done with that process. So I am absolutely learning that, and I'm reflecting, learning, trying new things. It is definitely the hardest part of the process. And what I've learned is I've talked to other authors who have been successful. For a debut author to get to be successful might take 10, 15 years. And I'm not exaggerating. To get known, to start to build where that can be your life rather than having a main job and then this is your second income. So if you're going to do it, if you're going to pursue it as a career, just be beware. It's the long game. You're in it for the long game. So let me share with you some of the things I've done and the things I've tried, and I'm still trying different things. So my daughter told me TikTok is a great place to go. I'd never done a TikTok before. She's a big influencer on TikTok, so she makes way more money than me just on TikTok. So I do have a social media account on TikTok. I've been doing some posts. That has been really good for me to build connections with the author community. It's been terrible at getting readers. That's been my experience. So I've done some social media ads with limited success. I did do, okay, I'm going to show a couple things. I'm going to share my Goodreads giveaway. That was a big marketing effort. I think there was value in it. Book clubs, I just had a book club just finished up this weekend, my book. And so I'm waiting to hear their feedback. But there were a group of people, probably about 12 people or 13 people that went through my book together as a book club. That was awesome. Word of mouth is proving to be the best way to spread the word. People know people and they start talking, they start sharing it. Getting reviews is really, really important. And I'm at about 54 reviews across all platforms. Only about, I think it's 18 on Amazon. And you really want to be up over 50 reviews. 100 is even better. So I talked to an author who went from being self-published, and then a year after he self-published, he was picked up by a traditional publisher. And he told me, because I asked him what his advice was, and he said, you've got to get those reviews. Those reviews are key to making your book kind of rise to the top, that people start to buy your book. I'm planning to do book signings. I haven't done that yet. I've had individual signings, but not like going to a Barnes & Noble yet and doing a book signing. And a lead magnet is something I'm going to do. So you guys know what the term lead magnet is? A lead magnet is when you provide a free product to a potential customer, and typically in exchange for their email address. So you might see that if you go on a website, they'll say, oh, hey, get our free brochure here or a free little thing here. provide your email address, and now you've got their contact information of potential readers, and then you can market directly to them. So my plan is to write a 3-chapter prequel to The Player in the Pond that is basically a flashback 10 years earlier of an event referenced in here, and then provide that free to people who just come on and provide their email address. And then I've got this audience of folks that hopefully they fall in love with the characters, and then they want to buy the book. But then also I have their contact information so I can correspond directly with them, because it might be a year from now, 2 years from now before they buy, but you can build that relationship, because really people want the relationship with the author. They want that kind of connection.
Especially in a market that is flooded, that may be flooded either with AI or just a lot of writers. That authenticity, that connection to the specific writer tends to be one of the best ways to continue growing, because it's in a world where we have a million possible books to choose from that all have fun titles or sound interesting. There's something to be said for like, that's my author or that's someone I know, and even just a little bit more personal connection becomes really meaningful. There's also, I'll toss out in line with marketing and self-publishing. There's a really good podcast and YouTube from it's called The Creative Pen, PENN. It's an Australian trade journal writer turned self-published author, and so definitely some really good deep dives into marketing strategies for authors there too. So.
And when we get done with this marketing piece, I'm going to jump over to the scammer piece, because there are highly sophisticated scammers out there just waiting to take your money to market your book. And so I want to just give you some warning signs of what to watch for. I've been surprised at how sophisticated and how aggressive they are. But this is one of the best things I did in terms of feedback. I did Goodreads. How many of you are familiar with Goodreads? Okay, good. Goodreads is basically where readers come together and they review their books, and then you can kind of see what different people said about different books. It's basically a forum where readers go hang out, I guess you could say. And so I did a giveaway on Goodreads where I said, all right, I'm going to give away 10 books. People can sign up for the giveaway. I was expecting maybe 200 or 300 people might sign up. Actually, to be honest, I was going to be happy if I had 100 people sign up for my giveaway. I ended up having 12,000 people sign up for my giveaway. And that meant that my book was put on 12,000 shelves of these people who says this is on their to-be-read list, that they want to read this book. Now, it has not translated into 12,000 sales. But in terms of exposure, that the way I see it, there were 12,604 eyes that looked at my book, saw the cover, read something about it, and had enough interest to click on, I want to enter this giveaway. So I took that as positive feedback, that the way it looks, the description was enough to create that sort of interest. Now, there's more I got to do to follow up on that, but I saw that as a positive sign. So that's one thing I did.
Check your messages.
And then here's my social media on TikTok. You know, I've got different. I had a theme song created for my novel, for those who want to do that. So I've got little things I share with as the author, and I've had some engagement, but that hasn't translated into sales.
Do you ever do micro readings, just like 30-second clips or anything like that?
I've done some of that. I haven't been consistent, but I've done some. I went out and sat in my farmer's field and read my book, and I've shared little passages. But I think what I'm learning is, it's back to your authenticity. People want to feel they want to feel they know the author. They want to feel that connection with the author more so than even the book. They buy the book because they feel a connection with the author. And so I'm working on how do I really show up in an authentic kind of way and make that kind of connection. I'm still learning that process.
And I want to, so some of the things you're giving us are data or metrics, kind of numbers based, like things people could track. And we have this we're in a culture, in a society where a lot of it's mediated through technology, and we can look at views, and we can look at views, and we can uh, uh, watch time and all this fun stuff, and clicks, and in that. It can be really easy to lose. If we know someone has like 8 million views, like part of this is sponsored by this workshop is sponsored by the D&D Plus Club, and so I'm thinking like Critical Role sometimes has 8 to 12 million views on YouTube, that kind of thing. And we might look at that, or we might, for the same reason that someone who's looking at, publishing their first song on Spotify or whatever it is, and look and go, that's a huge number, and we think if it's not 8 million, or if it's not 1 million, or if it's not 100,000, that it's not meaningful. And just, I want to anchor to the fact that like when people created stories throughout history, up until about 100, 125 years ago, because pre-mass media, people would write stories, would sing songs, would have creative artistic expression, and their goal was to impact the people in their everyday lives. So as we're thinking about numbers, looking at views, looking at sales or interested rates, when it comes to self-publishing, obviously the dream is everybody wants to be sell 1,000, 1 million, 100 million copies or whatever it is, right? But I think part of it is also when you're sincerely as a writer trying to add value, or as a creator trying to add value to whoever reads it, that's a meaningful piece of art. And it's focusing on the numbers as a profession is one thing, but when it comes to creating art, having that that recognition that it can be easy to get lost in chasing a number,
Yeah.
or a response or a sales kind of quota or whatever it is, and miss the fact that you have a really valuable product. And 100 years ago, if you could get 10 people to enjoy your stories, even if they were family and friends, that's still a really meaningful thing to do. If you write a song on the guitar and you think it's pretty amazing, and it encourages 10 of the cool people in your life, and you play it at holidays, like that's still a meaningful addition to people's lives. And that is kind of the mindset of the creator is one part of this that we do want to emphasize. Because your goal as a creator is to add value to the people around you, not to add value to 100,000 people around that may or may not know you. And so even as we're thinking about authenticity, usually the people who are best at focusing on trying to add value tend to get promoted further. But just even as we're thinking about the data and the numbers on it, that side of being a creator, I feel like is core.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think he's absolutely right. And I would say, this is what I call know your why, and it shouldn't be about money. Money is the side product of success. That shouldn't be your driver. So you've got to think deeply about, why are you doing this? Why are you writing this story? Whose life are you going to bless? Who's going to benefit from what you're doing here? And so, why does your story need to be heard? How will readers benefit from your story? What do you want readers to feel? So I'll just be honest about one of my things in here. I'm a person of faith, and I have children that have had crises of faith. So I wanted to write a book where people who were people of faith and people who had crisis of faith both felt welcomed in my book. That they didn't feel they were being pressured one way or the other, but that some questions were posed over which they could have a conversation. And that was part of my thing I wanted to give. I wanted to create a book that created that space where after reading the book, people could talk about these things. What about this idea of faith? What about, matter of fact, my two characters, my Calissa and Caleb, she's an agnostic. She has no belief in, she doesn't know if there's a God or not. Caleb's a person of faith. He believes in there's a God. And they have a little bit of a back and forth because they don't agree with each other. But that's okay. But they're able to have that conversation, and I wanted people to be able to have those kinds of conversations. So those are some of the things. That was part of my why, in why I wanted to write that story. It's also part of the reasons I self-published, because I didn't want a publisher to say, no, we're going to cut out that narrative because we don't want to touch the religion thing because it's too divisive. I wanted to create a space where people could have that conversation about spirituality and talk about that thing. Also, what do you want your readers to feel? You know, as I was writing my book, I cried multiple times because I was moved by my characters, and it feels strange. I mean, it's strange. You're thinking, why are you crying? Because you created these characters. You know, why are you feeling these emotions over something you created? And I can't explain it other than writing is just it's almost like an out of body process. Sometimes when you get in the flow, there are things that flow into your mind and you don't know where they came from, and they're there. You welcome them, you embrace them as they come. You feel them, you experience them, you live them, and it's just as real. It feels as real as if you're experiencing it yourself. So, but absolutely, what is your why, and being authentic about it.
Did you get any? Does that stir in any thoughts from you guys? Any questions or follow-ups?
I think that nailed it.
Tell us about, because you mentioned, you know, being kind of drawn in to the story of your characters. Just give us what's a character that, how did you come to decide what the characters would be, or discover who they were, and why are they meaningful to you? So just maybe pick one of your characters and what's the story of the character? Their creation.
You know, that's really interesting because I don't know whether authors create characters or characters create the author. Because when you're in that process, I mean, it's almost like at least for me, I'm discovering the character. I'm writing, I'm discovering the character, I'm discovering things about this character. So it's not like I sit out and say, this is who this character is going to be, and here's everything about them. There's some general framing, but my character, Caleb, who's my male protagonist, you know, his parents were killed when he was in college. His parents were killed. He was an only child. He finds himself alone in the world. You know, he ends up trusting some people who end up betraying him. You know, he's a person who's experiencing faith, trying to make sense of the world, but leaning into this idea of there can be some sort of divine power that's helping guide him in his life. That's kind of his. So he's got these questions. He's was an NSA hacker, but now he's framed for a crime he didn't commit. He's a fugitive, so he's on the run, and the FBI is chasing him. But he's trying to live this noble, kind of godlike life or God-following life, but yet here he is running from the law. You know, there's all these contradictions, all these moral dilemmas. And he has to navigate this world where sometimes what's right doesn't look right at all. And sometimes what's wrong, you know, so he wrestles with this, he struggles with this. And Calissa, she's the presidential campaign publicist. You know, her husband went missing 4 years ago, and he just disappeared. She doesn't know where he is. So can she have a relationship with Caleb now? Because they're starting to make a connection. But she doesn't want to betray her husband, but he's gone. You know, I mean, all these sorts of things. She's an agnostic. She was burned by faith in the past, doesn't believe in it. So I think it's learning these characters, seeing what they feel, thinking about what they feel, and also being influenced by the people around you. And I reflect a lot on my life experience, the life experiences of people around me, and what can I learn from those experiences. So all of those have influenced me in my writing. I don't know if I've gotten to your question or if I just kind of wandered around.
You're talking. You're direct. You're acknowledging it. Yeah, you're good. You're on target.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have to peace out, Oliver?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
a class.
Okay.
Thank you.
Noella
Thanks for
wanted
coming.
me to hold on to her copy to get it signed. Do you want me to do the same thing and you can swing back through? Okay. I didn't think about it till. But yeah. She didn't just leave it behind for the record. Like she wasn't just like, shh. She's like, can you have them sign it for me later?
But I will say, in the writing process, you get to know your characters. And one of my favorite characters in the book only appears in one scene. His name is Dex White, and he runs a men's shelter. And what moves me about who Dex is he's a person who had a really rough life. He was homeless, he was on the street, but yet he found a way to turn his life around, and now he runs this men's shelter. And he's just the story of struggle and victory. And, he moves me. I mean, when I read about Dex and see what he does, I go, wow, that's a great man. He's not educated. His language isn't sophisticated, but he's a hero to me. And so I think it's finding those characters and discovering them and then feeling them. And some of the characters just insert themselves in the story. At least that's been my experience. They just show up.
What's a character that you just kind of discovered on the way or inserted themselves into the story?
Dex White was one of them. I would say, let me think of some others. Roca is my FBI agent, and his marriage collapsed. He's got a child with mental illness. His daughter's not talking to him. He's living in a little apartment. All the things about his life just kind of showed up. I mean, he could have been an FBI agent and had everything going for him. Dream family, everything was great. But he's not. He can't seem to get promoted. Everything's going wrong, and now he's on this case trying to catch this fugitive, and it just feels like everything's against him. So all the aspects of his life just kind of showed up, and then when he gets put on this case, and he gets sent back to his hometown, which was Dallas, to do the investigation where the headquarters of the airline was, and he's got to go back to by where his house was, past the exit where his ex-wife lives. I mean, he has to deal with all of this emotional baggage while he's trying to do this thing. So that's another thing when you write characters. Characters are flawed. They are flawed, broken humans trying to survive in this chaotic world. And even your heroes have to be flawed and broken. And your villains have to have some redeeming aspect about who they are, even though they're flawed. So, I mean, even though they're villains, there's some good things about them. And when you write those characters, they feel real to people because they recognize, they find themselves in your characters. And that was really one of my goals, is helping my readers find themselves in my novel and feel some aspect of those characters. All right, other thoughts? Anything else on the screen look interesting?
I think you might have mentioned it, but I don't know if you clicked on it, the find your voice part.
Yeah. Find your voice. This is a little AI generated graphic right before we came on. I did mention it briefly about finding how are you going to write in this genre? What's it going to sound like for you? And so I wanted to share with you a little snippet from the novel on how I really had to condense my writing. It really became a clipped writing. So you can see here.
Do you want to just read it?
Sure. Yeah, let me read that. Thank you. It was past midnight, and the stillness had weight. He felt like he was being watched, though he knew he was alone. Lines of code flowed across the screen as his fingers moved with instinctive precision. The hum of the server provided a steady rhythm, comforting in its constancy. A mechanical heartbeat reminded him of the task's importance. Blue Rise Energy, massive, critical, one of the largest energy providers in the country. Tonight, they were trusting him, unseen, unknown, to test the security of their digital vaults. Off the books, not for the NSA, not even close. So some of the things that you might recognize with the voice, very short phrases, sentences, right? Sometimes just one word. Massive, critical, off the books. So not complete sentences, these little fragments flying around, but very strategically used to shorten, to accelerate the narrative flow. And so you'll see throughout the novel, very often, 3 words here, 1 word statements here, and then a little descriptor. And that's part of me finding my voice. That's how I would tell this story, was in these kind of this clipped sort of language. And that was what I kind of, through the editing process, revising process, that's kind of where I landed, what my voice sounds like.
And so you had the genre, which has certain features and that sort of thing, and then within that, you're trying to decide how you're going to engage in self-expression and author voice. Do you ever find yourself shifting the voice of the narrative to match the character too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Dex White would be a great example. Because Dex, well, and actually there's two characters, Miguel, who grew up on the streets of Los Angeles, and then Dex White, who was inner city, uneducated, in the whole, that rough life. Their language, how they speak, is very, very different from Caleb and Calissa, who are college educated. And so when you write the dialogue, it absolutely needs to reflect who that character is. And I would also say with that, reflect who that character is with respect, right? So you're not treating any character as being less than, at least this is for me, less than any other character. I mean, Caleb's an important character, but so is Dex White, and so is Miguel. And they're valuable for who they are and what they bring to the table. And when you write them, you write not in a condescending way, but in a way that respects that person and who they are and who they're showing up as in that moment. I mean, I think that's really important in the writing as well. Did that address the question?
Yeah. When you saw the Find Your Voice, were you wondering about how to discover like your voice as a creative, or were you thinking in a different direction?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more just like generally curious about what you put specifically for that and like the genre, but yeah, kind of like generally what that looks like in maybe someone who is like unsure about how to find their voice or like where that could come from.
Yeah, and I'll just respond to that. I didn't find my voice until I was well into the editing process after getting the feedback from the reviewers. So my best polished work that I sent out to the reviewers, I hadn't yet found my voice, how I wanted to land. I don't know if your experience has been that way or not, but that was my experience. And yet through the editing and revision process, I said, okay, it became more clear to me. This is how I want to sound. This is how I want the chapters to do. And so I had to go back and do a massive revision to bring everything into that voice, because some of my earlier writing wasn't in that voice. And that's okay. That's just part of the process. And I think one thing through the whole writing process is revision is where it's at. It's through the revision process you find the gold nuggets, and you're trying to get all those gold nuggets up at the top, and you're going to cut a lot of stuff because it's just not good. And that's okay. It's okay to work through the not great to get to the great.
And I would say my experience with writers is also like when people are afraid to share their work because it's not perfect, they actually miss out on the opportunity to grow into the voice. Because sometimes you making your best effort, like you're describing, that's a really common process where it's like you did your best effort, you tried to make it in the best voice you can, but it's not till you start getting resistance. And sometimes just someone saying, why don't you try this? And you go, I don't know. Wait, no, I do know. And then that suddenly, now you've made a decision about how you want it to go that you didn't, that was more subtle. So when someone starts offering you options, it's kind of like, this is a terrible example, but I have 3 daughters and my wife, and when we go to say, what do we want to eat tonight, right? And it's like, we're going to go out, I'm like, let's just get in the car, it's one of those nights. So we go out and I'm like, okay, what does everybody feel like? And they're like, I don't know. And so I'm like, does anyone want burgers? And then like 2 people will be like, no, absolutely not. And then someone's like, how about chicken strips? So then it's writing sometimes is like that. You have to kind of put something together first. Like you said, your best effort's a good place to start. But as you get feedback in the revision process and people ask or suggest or tell you that's weird, you have to make more intentional, conscious decisions about what you're including or excluding from the book, or what you really want the texture or style to feel like. And so that I think one of the best things we can do is keep is one, we have to be tough enough to take any sort of criticism because people will not always give it the way we like it. And so even the people closest to us, and sometimes because they're the closest to us, will give us the harshest feedback without realizing it. They're like, it doesn't even look like a finished product. I'm like, I know, I want you to focus on this though. Like, I'm trying to ask you about this. So I think that process, part of the revision process where you're engaging with feedback, I see a lot of students, a lot of writers, afraid to share work until it's perfect or until it's ready, but then they miss out on what sharing work and getting feedback and even kind of the pain of criticism and your response to it. They miss out on that opportunity to be pushed to make a decision about how they really want to write it, or what's this character really about in this scene. And if someone says, well, how come you didn't do it this way? Or why don't you try it this way? Suddenly you may not have had a reason for not doing it, but now you have a reason to do whatever the thing is. But you're kind of pushed into it by needing to answer those questions or needing to respond to the feedback you get.
Yeah. I'm glad you're speaking to that feedback piece, and I want to just pop over here to the creating a commercial grade product, because I want to make sure you're clear on what the process is, because that feedback is invaluable. It is so valuable, and the more comfort you can create for your person providing you feedback, more comfortable that you can create for them to be able to tell you what they really think, the better off you are. So I encouraged all of my editors, I had 3, be honest with me. Don't sugarcoat it, be honest with me, tell me what it is. And I am so thankful that they did. And to be honest, I'm embarrassed that I thought my best draft was as far along as it was, because it wasn't. And I needed that feedback to make it so much better. So here's the process. You create your best draft. And this is not your first draft. This is after you've done lots of your own revision. You've got it as far as you can get it. Then it goes off to your developmental editor. And your developmental editor is the one that's going to look at plot. This is macro view. Are there any major plot holes that they can spot? For me, it was, hey, you've got 15 points of view. That's way too many. Another thing I had going on was what was called head hopping. Do you guys know what head hopping is? When you're trying to tell a story from one person's point of view, so if I was explaining what I'm seeing in this room, but all of a sudden I jump over and now I'm in your head, and I'm talking from your point of view. Now I'm jumping over there and I'm popping in your head. Or now there's an omniscient narrator all here. Well, if you're popping around in different people's heads all in one scene, it really is confusing. So you've got to stay one person's perspective. So what can I see? When I'm looking out there, what can I see? Well, I can't see what's behind me. So I can't describe what's behind me while I'm looking that way. And so she provided tremendous feedback for me. I had too many points of view. I had some head hopping go around. I had to make some major shifts. So I did. Then I revised my plot, addressed the point of view issues. There were some structural issues. Then I went off to my line editor, whose focus was style and voice and flow. And she was brutal. She's a highly accomplished author. She sold about 2 million copies of her books. And she was brutal. And I love it. I love it. She was one of my best editors because she said, this isn't landing. This is screwed up. You need to fix this. Oh, and here's some ways you might fix it. Or this isn't believable, you know? And so she gave me great ideas on what to do to go back and fix it. And then I went then I went to my copy editor. She was the one that was looking at grammar, style guides, what's commonly accepted in the industry, are all the periods and commas in the right spot. She made those edits. Then I finalized the manuscript. Then it went off to the book designer, who was focusing on layout and format. Then I proofread the digital page proofs. Then it went off to the printer. They sent me a printed hard copy. I had to proof that. And then I had, once I proofed that, then it was ready to go to publication. But too often, I think, people go from their best draft to publication and skip all of these intermediate steps. And I think that's where what we hear the phrase AI slop or self-publishing produces poor work, is people skip these steps. Now, I acknowledge there is a cost to these steps, and not everyone is in the same economic state, and I acknowledge that. But even so, these steps need to be followed. So if a person doesn't have the resources to pay for these things, then create author groups, create groups of people that provide feedback and do these services for each other And that's what I've known some authors have done is, hey, I'm not going to skip the steps. I'm going to find people with this skill set, and we'll support each other in that journey.
And I think one of your other slides mentioned beta readers and their alpha readers, depending on what's like alpha readers might show up in this first 2 editor stage.
Yeah.
That just kind of getting the general feel, knowing they're not worrying about sentence level stuff. And then beta readers are like, I think I've got a finished product, but tell me, what do you see? And so working those in. This is also one of those, like as self-publisher, like you're mentioning pulling people in for these. And I know sometimes the challenge is you can pull people in, you may be able to pay for them, you may be able to work in writing groups like you said. And then what a lot of self-published writers try and do is they try and wear every single hat.
Oh.
And that's a hard thing to do. It's not impossible, but it is a hard thing to do. And when I interviewed Cameron Lasama last fall, and we're going to talk with him again in about a month, one of the things he said was he's basically spent the last 8 years basically giving himself his own writing curriculum, like trying to discover online how to do each of these steps. Because he didn't have the money to pay people for that sort of thing. He wanted to spend money on book art more than this sort of thing. And so trying to, this is a really nice way to lay out the process and also kind of think of it as different hats I might wear. Because when people try and do this, they don't always, if they're going to take the role of do-it-yourself fully, which is a hard thing to do, but if they are, really being able to pull it apart into individual stages and not focus on everything at once is something I find writers have to be disciplined about. And that's any kind of writing, not just novels and not just creative writing. You need to be able to say, I know I'm going to read through this 10 different times, and each time is going to have a different focus, because otherwise you'll start trying to fix everything in the first read through, and that can just get overwhelming for writers. So
yeah. And for those who choose to use technology, if you choose to use AI at a part of the process, AI can be useful in the line editing phase and doing some of that initial feedback on your line edits. I would say on the developmental piece, though, AI is not very good at this. You absolutely want to go to a human and have them look at your work to the degree that a person can afford. Bringing in humans at all stages, that's great. Or learn how to do it yourself. But I would definitely have another pair of eyes besides your own on your final work before you go publish. I can skip. I have examples, but I want to make sure we've got enough time.
One thing I wanted to ask you about as far as the shift from nonfiction to creative fictional writing, because you had done math textbooks and then you talked about discovering your voice along the way. What was, from a writing standpoint, what was the shift to go from a nonfiction or what we might consider an academic writing standpoint to shifting into more of a creative genre, a novel, short story, that developing characters?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very different type of writing. When you're doing academic writing, like in math textbooks, you're trying to focus on explaining concepts that are commonly accepted. How do you explain in a way that things that make sense? So you're focusing on kind of helping someone learn. When you're writing a novel, you're trying to entertain and also maybe pose some questions that are thought-provoking. It's a little different, than the academic writing. The objective's different. You're trying to create an emotional experience, I think, in a kind of something, stir up thought in ways that are different than, hey, I'm trying to learn this topic, I'm trying to master this ability to do this skills. So different writing. Although I would say that the skills I learned in the academic writing, in terms of how to write well and coherently, all those were transferable skills. But being able to be creative, make up characters, make up names, all that stuff's a lot. You don't do that in the academic writing space, and that's a lot of fun to do that and make up your characters and the places they go and the things they do. Other questions or topics or anything? We haven't done all of them on the screen, but I also want to make sure we're addressing whatever you want. We can dive into anything else that's left if you want, or we can just keep it on open questions.
I don't think we've done the create a commercial grade product. I don't think.
Yeah, we did. We just did that. That was the one that showed
that was
this.
this? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I got you.
But maybe on the business side, you had a couple things, right?
Yeah, let me go back over to the business side.
Because there was cost of doing business,
Cost
and
of
copyright,
doing-
and legal were both there.
Okay.
Could be things.
And then there's the scammers too.
yeah.
Cost of doing business. So this is what it cost me. So I just want to be honest with you where the numbers are. So I hired my developmental editor, my line editor, copy editor, book designer, and I hired a voice actor. And so I was about $8,000 in just through those industry professionals. And so I recognize that's a fair chunk of change to do that. I was in a position where I did have some funding I could do that with. On the voice actor, this is my second voice actor. My first voice actor was a lot less expensive, but he didn't have the skill. And so as he started to produce product, I said, this isn't commercial grade. And I said, I need it to be commercial grade. Can you get there? And he couldn't. He said, this is my best work. And I said, well, okay, I'll send you a free copy of the book, but we can't continue.
So only because we do some voice acting things with D&D, and I have a couple students who are interested in it. What was not commercial grade? What his ability to do voices, or the quality of like audio engineering side?
Yes,
Both.
both.
Okay.
So the what stopped it was when I listened to his final version. I had my AirPods in, and I was listening, and there was a hiss in the dead space between when the voice, when there was a pause, there was a hiss, and you can't have a hiss. It's got to just be quiet. And so I said, well, is this pre? I think it's pre-production. Is
For your post, yeah.
Yeah, is this? Have you done the post-production stuff on it? And he said, well, this is my best work. And I said, okay, well, it's not going to work. I said, I've got to have this be commercial quality. So I went back, and also he had a harder time distinguishing the voices. The voice actor that I ended up hiring is phenomenal. And his passion is voice acting. That's what he loves. He's an actor. He goes around to acting things. And so his ability to do voices was phenomenal. And so it cost me a lot more, about twice as much. But the product quality was where it needed to be. And then on the right-hand side, just some other fees, copyright, printing costs. So, it's an investment. And it'll be, to be honest, it'll be years for me to recoup this, if I ever recoup it. And I don't know. Or it could take off at some point. You just never know. It could take off at some point, and now we're watching the movie in 10 years, right? You just don't know. That's where I started. Any questions on that? All right.
More just an emotional reaction of,
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. I'm just saying.
It's a lot of money. And if you were on a tighter budget, you'd have to pick and choose what
You
you
have
do.
to be real strategic, yeah.
Copyright and legal. If you're going to do this, you'll want to get a copyright on your book. If you're self-publishing, you got to do it yourself. So it's $350 with the U.S. Copyright Office. So I set up my little company, Wilson Carter Creative LLC, and that's the company that took out the copyright. Scammers. This just in this morning. So I got this morning before I came in. This is the second time this person has contacted me. If you go out in this space, you will be contacted by scammers, and they will be very sophisticated. So I don't know how much you can see here. They reference my novel. They tell me what my novel's about. They build me up. They cite a real company, Quillhawk Publishing. They give the link to Quillhawk Publishing. I checked out the Quillhawk Publishing site. It looked legit. But then I looked at this person's email address, a couple little things. It's not a Quillhawk Publishing email address. That's interesting. It's just a Gmail. Here the name is Kendra. Down here it's Kevin. Oops, a little slip on the name.
Can't type your own
Okay.
name.
So what I do, if someone reaches out like this is generally what I do with anything like this. I went to Quillhawk Publishing directly, and I messaged them and said, hey, is this person legit? And this is the response back. Hi, Wilson. He's not an employer or representative of Quillhawk Publishing, likely a scanner pretending to represent us. Thank you for checking and letting me know. So it's a complete scam. And but what these folks are trying to do, they'll try to get you to buy video trailers. They're going to drop your stuff in AI. They'll create a video trailer, charge you a couple $100, and they try to get your money. And so they're just very aggressive. So I would never do business with someone who reaches out to you first this way. Never do business in general. Always only do business with people that you initiate the contact with to find them. Now, I don't mind. I wouldn't mind doing business with Quillhawk Publishing because I went to their website. They looked legit, and I could initiate it that way. But I would never initiate business. Someone tells me they're from Quillhawk Publishing and asks me to send them some money.
And if it's in an email, you want to not click on whatever link is in the email. You
Yeah.
want to find it the roundabout way too, just in
Yeah.
case that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think,
Did you have more on you gave us how you marketed, right? Your marketing strategies. Okay.
yeah, just a
Were
couple
there
things I've.
Costs associated with that?
There was a cost. So
Or with
this,
different strategies?
yeah. So this one, this was my highest cost so far. That was, I think I paid $495 to be able to do this giveaway on Goodreads. But it got me exposure to 12,600 people. So that was okay for me. I was willing to pay that, even though it hasn't translated into sales yet. It's exposure. In terms of sales, I'm at 145 copies now, is where I'm at. In terms of the different things that I've been selling. I track it every week and I just update my stats. You know, I'm going to try other things to market and we'll see just how it is. The good news is I'm getting reviews, and the reviews I'm getting are positive. So they're typically 4 and 5 star reviews, which I've noticed in the space, if you've got anything above like 3.5 stars, you're doing great. So even these bestsellers, you know, 3.71 stars. Okay, that's great. So that your observation as well.
I just generally with reviews. Like I know I have a couple people in my life who are like, I won't buy that if it doesn't have at least 3. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think I've heard you cover a lot from the business side. I'm curious about like what's the daily writing process or your weekly writing process for producing this kind of work?
So I was fortunate in that at the time I was writing this, I was working as an administrator. So I was an executive vice president. I had no time, hardly at all. But as an executive vice president, every 4 years, you get to take 2 months off as a sabbatical, and where you don't have to do any work. It's just basically because you've been dealing with stress for 4 years, and they want you to take your breath before you go crazy. So I leveraged that, and I strategically took my 2 months, and that's where I dug in and was just all day, every day writing. And that's
So this was you had a summer break equivalent of nonstop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was to do. So I knocked out my best version in one of those months. But I've been working on this for 7 years, so I wasn't starting from zero. And then I got it out, got more feedback, and then I did that next month. Well, I think I did like a July and then like in November to do all the edits and all that.
So
And
in the long term, the 7 years of working on it, what did the writing rhythm look like?
Rhythm's a generous word because
Staccato.
because there would be, my experience was there'd be times where I'd be very immersed into writing, you know, frequently, and then there'd be months that go by and I didn't touch it, and then I'd be back in it, and you know, it was just kind of, as life just kind of gets crazy sometimes. And so when I realized I was going to have these 2 months, I said, okay, I've been working on this for 7 years. I just want to get this done, get this across the finish line, and that's where I really buckled down and set the schedule for myself. I'm working every day, I'm writing every day. Right now, since it came out, I haven't been super focused on writing the prequel or the sequel. I know I'm planning to do that. I've been focusing on other things. I developed a game where that's where all my energy is focusing on my board game I developed. So that my energy is there. I will return to this and I'll focus on this, but I'm just kind of going where my creativity takes me right now.
Which helps when it's not the primary financial
It does.
substance, yeah.
Yeah. The ideal state is if your basic needs are met, and then you can do this, develop this on the side up until it can be strong enough that it can meet your basic needs. It's very, very difficult to start out the gate to try to have this meet your basic needs. So, any
Final
other-
questions, final thoughts?
I think I'm so.
Good.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks, Frank.
Well, thanks so much for coming out. I'm glad to have students here in person and those who participate online. I don't know if we have anyone out there, but I'm grateful you guys came out. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if I do have a couple copies left, so if anyone goes and finds this on my YouTube channel and wants to email me, it's gregory.fields@cgc.edu, and I can give a couple more books away. So other than that, I have 2 books that Oliver and Noella were hoping you would sign, and I can get back to them. And I don't know what you guys want, but thanks for being here today, and thank you, Frank, and thank you guys.